When a nosy HOA Karen spotted my wife with what she thought was a gun, she immediately called the police, convinced she had caught a dangerous criminal. But only 42 seconds after the cops arrived, their hands shot up, not to arrest her but to salute her badge. When we first moved into the neighborhood, we were warned that the HOA here was unlike most others, not simply enforcing the usual rules about lawns and trash bins, but operating more like a small kingdom with a handful of self-appointed rulers. At the center of it all was the woman everyone, sometimes behind her back but often to her face, called Karen. She was the kind of neighbor who could make a warm, sunny morning feel like a storm cloud had rolled over. Always watching, always commenting, and always convinced she alone understood what was best for everyone else. She patrolled the street with the vigilance of a prison warden. She took notes on which houses had weeds, who parked on the street too long, which kids left bikes on the sidewalk, and who didn't edge their lawns with enough precision. It was both laughable and exhausting. My wife, Alicia, had the patience of a saint, but I could tell even she found Karen's nosy presence irritating. Still, we brushed it off, telling ourselves that people like her eventually overplayed their hand and revealed themselves for what they were. Little did we know, that moment would come sooner than expected. The day started like any other. Alicia woke early, stretched, and went out for her morning run. She wore her standard athletic gear, leggings, a fitted training top, her hair tied back neatly. At her hip, as always, was her service weapon holstered securely alongside her badge. It wasn't something she flaunted, but it wasn't something she hid either. Alicia wasn't just my wife. She was a decorated federal agent with years of service under her belt. Her agency's policies required her to remain armed while off duty, and to her, carrying her firearm was second nature, no different than someone else grabbing their phone or keys before heading out. She jogged around the cul-de-sac, nodded politely at a few neighbors, and kept her rhythm steady. Karen, however, spotted her from her porch and froze like she had seen a ghost. Her face twisted into a dramatic mask of shock as she clutched her phone and began shouting to no one in particular. "She's armed! She's got a gun! Somebody do something before she shoots someone!" Her voice carried through the street, drawing attention from those walking their dogs, watering their lawns, or simply enjoying their morning coffee. Alicia, calm and unbothered, didn't even break stride. She glanced at Karen, gave a faint smile as though dealing with a child mid-tantrum, and kept jogging. I, standing in our driveway, felt a surge of anger. It was one thing for Karen to nitpick about grass height or garbage bins, but this was something different, something that could spiral dangerously out of control. Alicia gave me a sharp look, shaking her head, silently telling me not to intervene. Then the sirens came. The sound was sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet suburban morning. Tires screeched as two patrol cars whipped into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing blue and red across the neighborhood's pristine facades. Doors swung open and officers moved quickly, scanning for threats. For 42 seconds, everything hung in the balance. Neighbors gasped, peeking through curtains, gathering at the edges of lawns to watch what they thought might turn into a dramatic standoff. Karen was in her element, flailing her arms and pointing like she had single-handedly uncovered a terrorist plot. "That's her!" she shrieked. "She's got a gun! Arrest her before she hurts someone!" The officers, tense and alert, turned toward Alicia. Hands hovered near holsters, adrenaline surging through the air. But then one officer's eyes locked onto the badge clipped at Alicia's hip. Recognition flickered across his face, replacing suspicion with respect. He straightened his posture, snapped his hand up in a sharp salute, and called out, "Good morning, Agent Rivera." The others followed, their tones shifting immediately. The crowd of neighbors went silent, shock rippling through them as the scene transformed before their eyes. Karen's triumphant smirk dissolved into disbelief, her mouth hanging open as the officers treated Alicia not as a criminal, but as a superior. Alicia nodded calmly, her voice steady and firm. "Good morning, officers. Just out for my morning run. Everything under control here?" The tension drained instantly, leaving behind an air of stunned realization. The officers exchanged quick words with her, apologized for the misunderstanding, and turned their frustration toward Karen, who stood sputtering excuses, her earlier confidence evaporating in the heat of truth. Word of the incident spread faster than wildfire. By that evening, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with whispers and speculation. Some neighbors came by quietly to apologize, saying they couldn't believe Karen had gone so far. Others admitted they had always wondered what Alicia did for a living, but never guessed she was a federal agent. What struck me most, however, was the shift in how people looked at Karen. The same woman who had ruled the HOA with intimidation and self-importance now looked smaller, exposed, her credibility shattered in front of the very people she had lorded over for years. Karen tried to spin the story. She told anyone who would listen that she had only been protecting the children, that she couldn't have known Alicia was law enforcement, and that her actions were motivated by concern for safety. But the excuse didn't land. Neighbors rolled their eyes, muttered under their breath, and avoided her porch patrols more than ever before. The HOA board, which had often tolerated her antics because she kept the community running tightly, suddenly found itself under pressure. Parents complained about her overreach, homeowners expressed anger over the embarrassment she had caused, and whispers of removing her from the board grew louder. For Alicia, though, the fallout wasn't about Karen. It was about the deeper reality that incident had exposed. She confided in me one night, her voice heavy with emotion. "You know what scares me most?" she said. "It wasn't her ignorance. It was how close it came to being dangerous. 42 seconds. That's all it would have taken if those officers hadn't recognized my badge immediately. In another situation, I might not have been given the chance to explain." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. It was something I hadn't fully considered in the moment, too wrapped up in my anger at Karen. But she was right. The situation had teetered on the edge of disaster, and only Alicia's professionalism and reputation had pulled it back. Despite her calm exterior, I could tell the incident weighed on her. Every time she went out jogging afterward, I caught myself watching more closely, as if expecting another flare-up. Alicia, however, refused to let fear dictate her life. She carried herself with the same calm confidence as before, nodding politely to neighbors, jogging with her weapon and badge in plain view, daring anyone to question her right to exist as she was. That quiet defiance, that insistence on living authentically despite the scrutiny, made me admire her even more. Meanwhile, Karen's world began to unravel. At the next HOA meeting, residents openly confronted her. They cited not just the embarrassment of calling the police on a federal agent, but also years of petty harassment, bullying, and fear-mongering. One father recounted how she had scolded his daughter for drawing chalk art on the sidewalk, calling it graffiti. A retired couple complained about the endless violation notices for leaving their trash bins out a few minutes too long. The final straw came when a mother tearfully admitted Karen had followed her teenage son around the block, accusing him of looking suspicious simply for wearing a hoodie. The room turned cold, every eye fixed on Karen as she stammered excuses. For the first time, no one bought her story. A vote was called, and in a matter of minutes, Karen was removed from her coveted position on the HOA board. Her reign of petty tyranny had ended not with applause, but with silence, the kind of silence that says a community has decided enough is enough. Life slowly returned to normal after that, though the neighborhood itself felt subtly changed. Without Karen's constant interference, people seemed more relaxed. Kids played longer outside, parents chatted more freely, and even small disagreements felt less tense without her looming shadow. Alicia continued her routine, but now she was viewed differently. Neighbors greeted her with new respect, their eyes carrying gratitude rather than suspicion. Some even confided that they felt safer knowing someone like her lived among them. Karen, meanwhile, grew quieter. Though she still lived on the block, her voice had lost its edge. Where she once barked orders and critiques, she now muttered under her breath, retreating into the background. Occasionally, I caught her watching Alicia from a distance, her expression unreadable, but she never dared confront her again. One evening, sitting together on our porch as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Alicia reflected on the whole ordeal. "It's funny," she said softly. "Karen thought she was exposing me as some kind of threat, but all she did was expose herself. People fear what they don't understand, and fear makes them act recklessly. But respect, true respect, comes from standing firm in who you are. I listened, squeezing her hand, filled with pride. Alicia wasn't just my wife. She was a quiet force of strength, someone who had faced prejudice, ignorance, and danger, but had never allowed any of it to define her. Looking back, I realized that those 42 seconds had changed everything. What could have been a disaster became a moment of revelation, not just for our neighborhood, but for us as a couple. It reminded me that the world often judges by appearances, that quick assumptions can spiral into chaos, but also that truth, once revealed, has the power to cut through fear like light-breaking darkness. In the end, Karen's call had backfired spectacularly. She had wanted to humiliate Alicia, to assert control, but instead she had revealed her as the protector she truly was. A federal agent, a neighbor, a wife, and above all, a woman who carried herself with dignity even under attack. And though Karen may have lost her position and her influence, the greater victory was the lesson everyone else learned. That sometimes the person you're most afraid of is the one who's been standing guard all along. In a world full of noise, we follow the quiet truth stories that reveal, awaken, and transform. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more untold narratives that challenge perception and stir the soul. Hit the bell so you never miss when the compass points us to the next hidden truth. This is Hidden Compass Stories, where every story leads somewhere deeper.